Hi, I'm Ray Sheen. I've worked for the Department of Defense, a Fortune 100 company, and for the past 20 years, I've been managing a small consulting practice with a home office. So I've got a lot of experience working from home. You may find yourself now, due to the coronavirus pandemic, suddenly working from home. And what complicates this is your spouse is also working at home, and your children's school has been temporarily closed, so they're home. Let's go through some of the best practices that you could use to make this time productive. Our first tip is to set a daily schedule. Well, the reason for creating a daily schedule is to help to remove distractions. Your environment here at home is full of distractions, especially because of the unexpected nature of your working at home. So schedule blocks of time in which to do the work. Set aside several hours in the morning and the afternoon, maybe several times throughout the day, in order to get your work done. Build your schedule around the availability of other team members that you'll be working with, other business associates, so that you'll be available online or via phone at the same time that they are going to be working. Also, plan for some family time in these blocks. Set aside your blocks of time in a way that allows you to spend the time to have lunch with the family or to spend a little bit of time with the kids. I usually try to do roughly a 2-hour block of work and then take a half hour or an hour off and then another 2-hour block of work. Finally, discipline yourself then to actually follow this. Don't be rigid about your time schedule to where you have to meet an exact start time and exact end time. But don't let yourself get distracted and pulled away, and the next thing you know, you've lost an hour worth of your scheduled time. Our next tip is to create a home workspace. Creating the home workspace is a place where you'll be able to get your work done effectively and efficiently. Now, that might be in a separate room or in a garage. It could be just a corner of one of your existing rooms, but make sure it's one without a lot of distractions. In that, set up a workspace. Put up a card table or set up a workbench of some type. Whatever kind of work you're doing, create the workspace that you need to be productive. A key here is both noise and visual isolation so that you aren't being distracted. I know, for instance, with me, when I first set up my home office, I had to make sure that there was no TV within seeing or hearing. Otherwise, I would be pulled away to the TV. You may have your own distraction elements. Watch out for those. And then once you've set up your work environment, make sure that you have all the equipment that you need there so that you don't have to keep getting up and running around for someplace else. So that's phone, computer, printer, or if it's the nature of your work is you have other hand tools or equipment that you're working with, which means that while selecting that work environment, ensure that you have plenty of light, plenty of power, whatever else you need to be productive in your workspace. Our third tip is to use virtual workspace applications. Now, what do I mean by virtual workspace applications? Well, probably your business has some applications in which you normally work and you can remote in on. These would be ones that you want to ensure that you have your credentials, that you can connect, and that you're able to get that work done, because that's going to be critical for being productive, is that you can get into the applications that are required to do your work. There are some virtual workspace applications that you can use for just basic file sharing. If you don't have something that you can remote in, you may still want to use file sharing apps like Dropbox or Google Drive to be able to move files around, documents around, to easily move those between yourself and your other business associates who are also working from home. There are some more advanced applications that you can use, like Microsoft Teams, that has the ability to allow you to set up a workflow, run meetings, in addition to sharing documents. We used to use SharePoint a lot, but that's been transitioned now to Microsoft Teams. There are many other apps, so that's not meant to be an endorsement of just that one. Use whatever applications your business is comfortable with. Now for tip number 4. Schedule collaboration calls with your business associates. One of the challenges that you'll have is staying coordinated, because not only are you working from home for the first time, but many of your business associates are also working from home at the first time. So I recommend that you plan some collaboration calls, and I would encourage you to consider these to be calls at least once in the morning and once in the afternoon in order to stay coordinated. Get together and decide, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're doing, are there any questions? You don't have the ability to just walk down the hall and ask someone, what are you doing, or can you take a look at this? You need to plan these calls. Otherwise, you suddenly find yourself playing phone tag with everyone else and being very unproductive. So as I said, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, that's a good rule of thumb, but you may even need to have more frequent ones, especially if you have people in multiple time zones. Also, plan for any handoffs of work. If you're going to be completing a document, completing a file, completing some work, and then turning it over to the next person that you normally would just carry it down the hall or hand it over to them, now set up to where when that handoff is happening, you send a text or an email so that they know to look for it, they know to get busy. Otherwise, again, we can have hours go by without getting any work done on that item. It's going to be difficult here in this temporary work-at-home environment to stay coordinated. That's why it's important to have these calls so that we don't have a lot of idle time, downtime, or unproductive time by anyone in the organization. Tip number 5 is to use one of the virtual conferencing applications. Virtual conferencing applications allow you to do one of those collaboration calls I mentioned or other work calls, but do those in a video conferencing environment. This will be much faster than just doing a normal phone call. People can see each other. The body language will help people to understand what you're communicating, what's going on. In fact, an interesting thing that I found is that when we do these virtual conferences, we find out when someone thinks they're talking and no one is hearing them because they left their phone on mute. You'll see their mouth moving, you hear nothing, you know to quickly remind them. They aren't thinking they've communicated where no one has heard them. Or you may also find that some people are not engaging, not following, not understanding. Again, in this visual meeting, you can see the body language, the eye contact. Are they really getting it? Makes it easy also to share files. And frankly, I found that when I know that I'm going to be on a visual conference call where people are going to be seeing me, I'll be a little more professional. Clean up a little bit. You just have a different air and a different attitude. And whether we want to believe it or not, when we look better, when we look sharper, we are more effective. So I recommend using these visual conference calls, provided you have the bandwidth. Use these visual conference calls for part of your coordination or problem-solving meetings. Our next tip is to create a Kanban schedule. You may not have heard of a Kanban board before. It's something that we borrowed from Agile project management. It's a way to manage your action items, and in fact, I like to put it think of it as an action item list on steroids. It really helps us to focus in on the work that we need to be doing at any one time. Now, what I do to set up this board is I have 4 columns: a plan column, a work in progress column, a finished column, and an on hold column. Every item that I need to work on is a post-it note that goes into, is a separate post-it note that I'm using to move between these columns. At least that's what I do when I'm using a physical Kanban board. In fact, I've set this up on our refrigerator in the kitchen at times when we're working on a project. Now, the way you use this is all the activities for the day start off in the plan column. As you begin to work, you move one of these items to the work in progress column. My rule of thumb is only 2 items are in the work in progress column at a time. I may have one that I'm waiting for a call back or an email, and then I'm working on the other one. But I keep working on just those 2 until I finish one of them and move it to the finished column. If I run into a roadblock, something that prevents me from going any further on that until after we've done the collaboration call, or maybe even until back when I get in the office again, I'll move that to the on hold column because I can't work on it anymore. And then I'll grab another one from the plan column, move it to my WIP column, and get working again. Again, this is a great way for focusing your activity and tracking your progress throughout the day, especially when you're doing those 2-hour blocks of time that you've worked for a couple hours, you've taken an hour off, and now you're coming back. It's easy to pick up where you left off and stay focused on getting work done. Our last tip is to do a daily retrospective. What do I mean by a daily retrospective? Well, you're doing this stuff for the first time. This is something that's not part of your normal routine. So at the end of each day, take a minute and step back and say what worked and what did not work this time. And based on that, make changes for tomorrow. You're not cast in concrete. This isn't a forever environment. So make the changes you need to be more productive. That might mean that you look at how much work did I actually accomplish? Is there a way that I could make my workspace more productive? Can I set things up differently? Maybe I should schedule things differently, or just the way that I'm interacting with people and the systems and the applications. Is there a way to make my time more productive? Again, take 5 minutes at the end of each day, ask that question, and get set up for the next day. You'll probably find you have to make multiple changes. I know I sure did when I first was starting out, until I got a routine and an office setup that worked for me. Well, these are our 7 tips for temporary work at home. Set a daily schedule, create a home workspace, use a virtual workspace app when appropriate, schedule collaboration calls, and when you can, use virtual conferencing apps to get that look and feel of actually being with your work associates. Create a daily Kanban board, and then finally, do a retrospective at the end of each day. I hope your time will be productive, and I hope we soon will be getting everything back to normal. Thanks for listening. If you have further questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Bye now.